Welcome everybody to this remote meeting of North Lanarkshire Council. Before we go to the business of the meeting, I would like to remind you of the functionality which will assist with the smooth running of the meeting. Unless you're speaking, can all members please ensure that your microphone is muted. If you have declared an interest in a particular item of business, the clerk will remove you from the meeting to the lobby and reinstate you once that item of business has been dealt with. Can I remind members that if you wish to declare an interest during the meeting, please type DEC in the chat bar and hit return. If you wish to raise a point of order, and type in the chat bar PO and hit return. If you wish to ask a question, please hit the space bar in the chat and then hit return, and the clerk will notify me of the order of speakers for each individual item. Please do not use the chat bar for any other purpose. Colleagues, I would like to inform you that the meeting is being live streamed through the Council's YouTube channel and is publicly available. If the meeting needs to be adjourned for any reason, the stream will stop and a new stream will commence when the meeting resumes. In addition, the meeting will be available afterwards as an archived recording. Colleagues, this is the annual budget setting meeting, and as it has been practiced in previous years, I'm willing to be flexible on the timing of speeches, and the mover and the seconders of motions and amendments in respect of agenda item 2 may speak for up to 10 minutes. I have a note of apologies from Councillors Anderson, Feeney, Bannon, Michael Coyle, Alan Valentine and Weir. Are there any other apologies? Thank you very much.
Sorry, Provost, if I can put in an apology for Callum Curry.
Thank you. Agenda item 1 is declarations of interest in terms of ethical standards in Public Life Scotland Act 2000. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you very much. Agenda item 2 is the revenue budget 2022-2023 to 2024-2025 and council tax for 2022-23. This is a report by the Head of Financial Solutions, providing financial information that enables the Council to set its 2022-23 council tax and revenue budget from 2022-2023 to 2024-25. I will now ask Elaine Kemp to take us through the report. Elaine.
Thank you, Provost, and good morning, everyone. The budget position to be addressed this morning is well known to elected members. It's been the subject of discussion for much discussion over recent weeks and months. Therefore, as is usual at the council budget setting meeting, I don't intend to go through the report in detail. Unless there are any questions on the report, Provost, I'll pass back to you and allow the meeting to consider council tax for 22-23 and the revenue budget for 22-23 to 24-25. Thank you.
Members, we've had the report. Has anybody got any questions for Elaine? I don't see anybody in the chat bar. Kirsten, just clarify that I've not missed anybody.
No, Provost, there are no questions.
You'll see there's been some changes of duties today, so Kirsten's the one that's going to be helping me monitor the chat bar instead of Mark. If there are no questions, can we move on to agenda item 2A, which is the setting of council tax? Councillor Logue, I understand you've got a proposal.
Yes, indeed, Provost. Having read the report which has been tabled today, I would move that the council tax rate for financial year 22-23 should be increased by 3% to address the identified shortfall of 19.584 million. I so move.
And do we have a seconder for that?
I'll second that, Provost.
Thank you. Have we any amendments to that? Councillor Cullen.
Thank you, Chair. The Conservative Party would like to propose a 2% council tax raise.
Do we have a seconder for that?
Provost, have pleasure in seconding the amendment.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other amendments? I don't see anything else in the chat bar. If that's the case, can we go to the vote, Mark?
Thank you, Provost. Just to clarify, the motion is for the 3% council tax rise and the amendment is the 2% council tax rise. And so I'll just go through the list of elected members alphabetically. So Councillor Anderson is an apology. So Councillor D. Ashraf.
Provost, apologies. Can I raise a point of order here? You hear me okay? I haven't put typed in. If there is an amendment to the 3% that is being proposed, I'm taking it that the amendment is 2%. Surely it's incumbent upon the mover and seconder of 2% to outline where they propose to make cuts.
Anybody will do that when they propose their budget in the next item.
People are shaking their head. What is the procedure here? If we're putting a 3% increase, that concurs with the request from the reports that we've received. If we're going with a 2% increase,
Councillor Morgan, that's not a point. Councillor Morgan, that's not a point of order. We're going to move to the vote.
I'm asking the procedure. When do we get clarification of the cuts that's being proposed by the 2%?
You will get that when at the revenue budget discussion.
Okay.
Councillor, sorry, Mark, we go to the vote?
Thank you, Provost. So we'll start with Councillor D. Ashraf.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me? Motion.
Yes.
Motion, thank you.
Councillor Jai Ashraf.
Motion.
Councillor Baird. I think Councillor Baird is on the meeting. Councillor Baird, can you hear me? Okay, we'll move on. Councillor Barclay.
Motion.
Councillor Beveridge.
Motion.
Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Motion.
Councillor Burgess.
Amendment.
Councillor Burrows.
Motion.
Councillor Cameron.
Amendment.
Okay. Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Carricker.
Motion.
Councillor Carson.
Motion.
Councillor Castles.
Motion.
Councillor Michael Coyle is an apology. Councillor Sophia Coyle.
Motion.
Councillor Cullen.
Amendment.
Councillor Curran.
Motion.
Councillor Curry is an apology. Councillor Damasio.
Motion.
Councillor Docherty.
Motion.
Councillor Doolan.
Motion.
Councillor Douglas.
Amendment.
Councillor Duffy.
Motion.
Councillor Fannin is an apology. Councillor Farouk.
Motion.
Councillor Feeney is an apology. Councillor Fisher.
Motion.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Motion.
Councillor Gallagher.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldie.
Motion.
Councillor Goldsack. Councillor Goldsack. Okay, we'll move on. Councillor Gourley.
Motion.
Councillor Graham.
Motion.
Councillor Hogg.
Motion.
Councillor Hume.
Motion.
Councillor C. Johnston.
Motion.
Councillor T. Johnston.
Motion.
Councillor Jones.
Motion.
Councillor Kelly, Paul Kelly, sorry.
Motion.
Councillor Peter Kelly.
Motion.
Councillor Kerr.
Motion.
Councillor Larson.
Motion.
Councillor Lennon.
Motion, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Linden.
Motion.
Councillor Logue.
Motion.
Councillor Lochran.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor.
Motion.
Councillor McGowan.
Motion.
Councillor Masterton.
Motion.
Councillor McCulloch.
Motion.
Councillor McKendrick.
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor McManus.
Motion.
Councillor McNally.
Motion.
Councillor McNeil.
Motion.
Councillor McPake.
Motion.
Councillor McVeigh.
Motion.
Councillor Mooney.
Motion.
Councillor Morgan.
Motion.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Motion.
Councillor Pettigrew.
Motion.
Councillor Quigley.
Motion.
Councillor Redding.
Motion.
Councillor Rorty.
Motion.
Councillor Shevlin.
Councillor Shevlin's having trouble joining the meeting just now.
Thank you. Councillor Shields.
Motion.
Councillor Stephen.
Motion.
Councillor Stevenson.
Motion.
Councillor Stocks.
Motion.
Councillor Stubbs.
Motion.
Councillor Alan Valentine is an apology. Councillor Annette Valentine.
Motion.
Councillor Watson.
Amendment.
Councillor Weir is an apology. Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
Finally, Councillor Woods.
Motion.
Thank you. The motion has attracted 60 votes and the amendment has attracted 7 votes, so the motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the council tax agreement is for a 3% rise. At this point, now that we know what the council tax is, if people haven't already done it, could they submit their proposed revenue budgets to Mark? Sorry about that. Thought it was off. So that he will be able to circulate them during the speakers. Thanks very much. I'll now call on the agenda item B is the revenue budget. We will now move on to the options to balance the budget. I will call on the leader of the council, Councillor Logue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Provost. Colleagues, in moving this motion today, I wish to quote from the letter which was sent by COSLA on the 24th of December on behalf of the 32 council leaders to the First Minister and Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Economy. In this, it was explicitly stated that the view of all leaders, including SNP administration councils, was, and I quote, that the proposed settlement for 22-23 is a £371 million real terms cut in core funding. Every penny of the proposed cash increase is for Scottish Government policy priorities and in real terms erodes local authorities' core funding. Put simply, it does not allow us to enable residents to live well locally. I close quotes. Colleagues, these comments are so accurate and so powerful, and I'd like to ask my SNP colleagues on this call today, do they share the unanimous views highlighted by all SNP administration leaders in Scotland, or once again, are they going to indulge in year-on-year partisan denial of the presenting financial reality. As Kenny McCaskill, a former SNP Cabinet Secretary, recently said, and I merely quote, "SNP councillors to date have been silent and submissive, stating that supporting your government is one thing, but selling out your community is another." Undoubtedly today, we will hear references to the additional £120 million which the Scottish Government gave in response to the COSLA letter. As a result of this, North Lanarkshire Council received an additional £7 million. While this is very welcome, this administration's views replicate those of COSLA, that this is one-off funding, and unless the government baseline this into future allocations, it will create significant cost of living pressures next year, when there is a possibility, according to COSLA, of a 6% council tax increase. In simple terms, it is apparent that the SNP government have offloaded necessary tax increases to support services onto local councils. Faced with the revised cut of £251 million for all councils, with no additional provision for an increase in demands for services or pay increases, or the increased burden of national insurance contributions, this council is left with a £19 million shortfall, as highlighted in paragraph 7 of the budget motion. This is over and above the £300 million which has been removed from our budget since 2007. As such, it is now abundantly clear from all the data collated by SPICE that when it comes to Scottish Government funding, local councils are at the bottom of the proverbial pile. Notwithstanding this, North Lanarkshire Council has, throughout this administration, adopted a very sound financial management approach by agreeing to a 3-year strategy for the reasons outlined in paragraph 5 of the budget motion. This strategy was highly commended in the best value audit report undertaken by Audit Scotland. Resulting from this, the Labour administration will move a motion without any additional cuts to services, without closure of any facilities, and with no compulsory redundancies. Provis, in developing this budget today, there are 3 crucial obligations that this Labour administration is committed to. We are fully aware of the current cost of living pressures. These will affect every single resident in North Lanarkshire, and particularly our most vulnerable. It is vital that we offer them all the support we can, and the Labour budget presented today does just that, with the most comprehensive cost of living packages which this council has ever embraced, and Councillor Burrows will expand on the details of these. The second is our environmental obligations. As the council heads towards net zero, it has been more important that our green spaces, country parks and environment are cared for and given attention. That hasn't always been easy with continuous SNP cuts to our budget, but our motion today sets out in detail how we can achieve a greener future for North Lanarkshire, including, amongst others, investing in 4 new 4G football pitches in areas where hitherto there has been little investment in facilities. And lastly, Provis, we must look to the future of our children and young people. As we emerge from the pandemic and this cost of living crisis, as we undoubtedly will, we must ensure that our children and young people are equipped for the world of tomorrow. Too much time has already been taken from them during the pandemic, and with a wealth of evidence showing that children and young people in poverty have vastly reduced life chances, we have made the decision in our budget today to support those children and young people who today have been failed during the pandemic. Provis, I have spoken on many occasions of our desire to make North Lanarkshire a great place to live, work, invest and visit. Therefore, this budget also continues on our track record. We have the most ambitious council house building programme in Scotland, which will continue with the delivery of almost 2,000 new houses as part of our Homes for the Future programme. We are investing an additional £40 million in our Community Investment Fund this year, which will see new facilities for every town across North Lanarkshire, and we are continuing our programme to replace every school built before 1996. Provis, our lives and services have been affected by the pandemic, but I can assure you this has not affected our ambition. Our priorities are the priorities of our residents. With new schools, new nurseries, Labour is helping North Lanarkshire children to get the best start in life. We are employing more teachers than ever before, and we are feeding more children every day with our nationally acclaimed Club 365. We are also achieving our carbon reduction targets as we head towards net zero by 2030, as outlined in recent reports to committees. In addition, we are also investing £3.5 billion to reconfigure and revitalise town centres, and we are starting to see the tangible benefits of this. Provis, our Labour budget today shows that this administration is on the side of residents in North Lanarkshire in promoting community facilities, jobs and businesses. Recently, it has been reported that North Lanarkshire is the fastest growing local economy in Scotland, with record investment in housing, schools and business start-ups, with a 5.6 increase in businesses since 2016 compared to a national average of 2.6. North Lanarkshire businesses have increased the number of jobs by 4.7 since 2016 compared to the Scottish average of 0.6. All of this is taking place despite 15 years of unremitting SNP cuts to our budget. As we head towards May elections, I'm confident that residents across North Lanarkshire will have noted the Labour administration's commitment, drive, determination and strategies to maximise the life opportunities for all residents, young and old. As stated before, we are on their side. I move the motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burrows.
Provost, thank you. Good morning, members and officers. I'm delighted to second the Labour Group motion today and to go through some detail on our budget proposals, but it's important to make some comments first. It's right to emphasise again what the leader has just stated. This Labour budget today is a cost of living budget. As we emerge from the pandemic, another challenge awaits us as household bills increase. This has a huge impact on our residents and especially our most in need. Our staff are also affected by this, and we are rightly proud that throughout our time in administration, this group has never implemented a single compulsory redundancy. It's clear to all of us, perhaps now more than ever, just how crucial our staff are, which is why, once more, as the leader states, there are no compulsory redundancies in this Labour budget. Provost, in my years as convener of finance, one of the biggest challenges each year is prioritising services due to the continuous SNP cuts from Edinburgh, which force us to choose one service over another. It is only through sound financial management that this can be avoided. One-off funding from any government is always welcome, but it does nothing to plug the gap in our budget year on year. That, Provost, is left to us. The lack of long-term budgeting by the SNP government, despite knowing years in advance what they receive from the UK government, hinders councils like North Lanarkshire. Provost, for years we've heard the SNP group in North Lanarkshire tell us that they're always receive additional funding each year. But this year, even their own council colleagues wrote to the First Minister, as the leader has stated, demanding a fair assessment. I'm pleased this year that the SNP have shattered their own myth and finally accept the perilous position their government put councils like North Lanarkshire in year after year. Despite this, I'm pleased to say that as a result of our proactive financial strategy, there is not a single cut to any council service in our budget today, quite the opposite. The cost of living budget we move to today will invest in North Lanarkshire, not simply the status quo. Let me now spell out how it will do so in 3 areas that the leader has already set out. Provost, we recognise that the cost of living crisis will hit every resident in North Lanarkshire. As a Labour administration, our priorities are residents' priorities, and this is the #1 issue on the doorstep of North Lanarkshire. We have already taken action outside the budget process to provide additional grants to those most vulnerable to help with rising energy costs in recent weeks, but we must go further, which is why today our Labour budget has over 2.5 million of investment in a cost of living fund, which will continue successful programmes such as discounted or free leisure access for older and younger people, a pensioners' fuel grant of £100, continuation of the clothing and footwear grant for early years children, an additional £500,000 investment in the Scottish Welfare Fund to mitigate previous SNP cuts. Provost, we are doing all this we can without our powers to tackle the cost of living crisis. It's time that other areas of government ended their petty politics and did the same. Provost, the second focus on our budget this year is our environment. Time and again we hear from our constituents about the impact of the pandemic on our environment, with streets, cemeteries and siting of verb in common complaints. Last year we took steps to address this and progress has been made. However, we are not complacent. We also recognise this is not simply enough to maintain our green spaces, country parks and sports pitches. We must invest in them too, which is why our Labour budget will invest in a Greener Futures Fund, which will continue our Recovery NL programme, give our cemeteries the respect they deserve and continue our policy of free pest control. Not only that, but the villages of Cleland, Moss End, Hart Hill and Moodiesburn will receive brand new sports pitches, with other areas having their grass pitches upgraded. The Greener Futures Fund will invest a total of almost £9 million in towns and villages across North Lanarkshire. Investment in areas that our constituents say time and time again are the most important issues in their community. Lastly, Provost, our young people have perhaps the hardest hit by the pandemic. For the reason the leader has outlined previously, we need to ensure that our young people are able to catch up on the opportunities they have missed. It is vital that we stand ready to offer support, particularly for our most vulnerable. This is directly linked to the cost of living crisis. Studies show that our most vulnerable children have been the ones most affected by the pandemic. That will sadly also be true of the cost of living crisis. This makes it more important than ever that we invest in the Next Generation Fund to give our young people the best start in life. Provost, the SNP have recently decimated our share of the Scottish Attainment Challenge funding. Based on these cuts, North Lanarkshire would lose 20 teachers who have been working tirelessly with pupils across North Lanarkshire to improve attainment. This is unacceptable, particularly as we recover from the pandemic. The SNP may no longer care about pupils achieving their potential in North Lanarkshire, but we do, which is why we're reversing the SNP cut to provide over £1 million towards the Scottish Attainment Challenge funding for this year. We're committed to playing our part in supporting those young people and their families. This is why we're committed to continuing the Groundbreaking Club 365 programme, offering discounted leisure access for care experience in 11 to 16-year-old children, and ensuring as many of our eligible families as possible receive the school and early years clothing and footwear grant. In addition to this, our ambitious plans to rebuild or replace every school built before 1996 continues at pace, with the new Canberra Sinkside Community Hub, a shining example of how this Labour administration is delivering for our young people and their families. Provost, this Labour budget I second today clearly shows that Labour is committed to investing in our next generation. But Provost, that's not all. Just as important as our young people are elderly and vulnerable. Social care has been under immense pressure in recent years, in many cases no thanks to the action of our governments in Edinburgh. We recognise that the pandemic had disproportionately affected our elderly and vulnerable population, which is why our budget motion today commits to investing £20 million in health and social care through the IGB this year. Promised, residents in North Lanarkshire will clearly see from this budget that we are on their side. We have the most ambitious council house building programme in Scotland. We are now in the third year of our Community Investment Fund, which will see new facilities for every town across North Lanarkshire. We are protecting and investing in community facilities, providing record investment in homes, schools and new community hubs, tackling the cost of living crisis, securing a greener future for North Lanarkshire, investing in the next generation and protecting our elderly too. All of this despite continuous SNP cuts to our budget for the last 15 years. Just imagine what we could do with more. Finally, Provost, it gives me great pleasure to second this budget today, a budget of residents' priorities, a budget which invests in the future and protects our progress, a budget which tackles poverty and inequality, grows our local economy and continues our mission for North Lanarkshire to be the place to live, learn, work, invest and visit. A budget for all of North Lanarkshire that shows residents that Labour are on their side. I second the motion, Provost. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cullen, you've put up that you've got a budget amendment into the chat bar. Councillor Cullen.
Thank you, Provost. I take it that'll be shared now by Mark. Yep, okay. Thanks, Provost. The Conservative Party do have an amendment. As we come to the end of the current administration, it falls upon us, I'll go back to Councillor Morgan earlier actually, this is the point at which we will explain how we would mitigate a 2% council tax rise, had that been true. As we come to the end of the current administration, it falls upon us again to set a budget against a backdrop of sustained and continued budget reductions, foisted upon local authorities by the Nationalist Scottish Government. The tenure of this and the previous two administrations have seen swingeing cuts to local government. But what makes the cuts of the last number of years in particular stand out is that they have been solely down to the choices of the Nationalist devolved government in Holyrood. Yet they still seek to convince their supporters that it's all down to Westminster. The budget this year only balances due to further increases in council tax as previously voted for, and plans put in place earlier in this administration to identify and head off the worst of the pain and impact of the Scottish Government reductions for this year, and as you can see in the budget papers, for the coming 2 years. For anyone to say there's been no cuts this year, tell that to the residents affected by the £16 million worth of cuts and charges taken in advance of this budget to balance the books. These cuts include increased burial costs and loss of jobs as services realign to save money and reduce service delivery capability. We are fortunate this year that we benefit from some one-off funding, some of it coming from the Scottish Government and sold to the country as the equivalent of a 4% council tax rise. We sit here in committee after committee and laud quite rightly the work of the council officers. Prior to the provision of the one-off funding, the senior finance officer recommended a 3% council tax rise to try and mitigate the future impacts that cuts will have on our budgets. You would have thought that this new money, that recommendation would all but disappear. But no, it remained at 3%, as has been voted for earlier in today's meeting. This is because, yet again, the Nationalist Government have hoodwinked the Scottish people by not committing to add the new funds to the base budget, something they made little of at the parliamentary announcement of the extra £120 million. The officer recommendation says it all. Colleagues, in our motion today, we have sought to try and go some way to mitigate the cost of living crisis of local residents, particularly in our plan to rebate in full the council tax rise through a one-off grant. Yes, this doesn't solve the problem next year, but it is what we can do this year that counts. We have also sought to distribute the remainder of the one-off funding to support all residents in areas that encourage and improves the environment, educates and encourages climate change, improves infrastructure developments and accelerates projects that may otherwise not be delivered. We have also sought to contribute to both the health and well-being of our residents through a range of measures to promote and increase the use of our parks and leisure facilities. In recognition of the establishment of community boards, we are providing funding for the boards to improve their areas. And finally, in the year that marks the 70th anniversary of the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, and to mark her contribution and service to this country, we have provided funds to support community-led events at both town centre and local levels. I move our amendment. Thanks.
Who's seconding that?
Provost, I'm seconding.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Provost. As part of my contribution for today's meeting, I'll first discuss a number of the one-off growth proposals included in the Conservative budget motion, the full list of which should now be distributed to members, before moving on to the wider budgetary positions facing North Lanarkshire. Firstly, various periods of closures and restrictions have hampered local businesses in our town centres to an unprecedented degree over the past 2 years. As we recover from the pandemic, it's important that we look to pursue measures that can rejuvenate our town centres. That's why I'm very pleased that the Conservative budget includes funding that will support community-led initiatives with the goal of revitalising town centres in North Lanarkshire. Secondly, on the 1st of February, new legislation that requires households to install interlinked smoke and heat alarms and a carbon monoxide alarm took effect. Despite a poor public awareness campaign and polling in the last few weeks showing that nearly half of Scotland was still not ready to comply with the changes, the Scottish Government refused Scottish Conservative calls to delay the date at which the new laws would come into force. Even although the current position of the Scottish Government is that there will be no penalties for non-compliance, it's still vital that we look to do everything we can to help as many people as possible who may be struggling financially to install the appliances, and as a result, we are proposing a smoke alarms grant support fund in our budget. Thirdly, from the 31st of October to the 12th of November 2021, the UK Government hosted COP26 conference took place in Glasgow, and this was a pivotal moment for the future of our planet. The conference produced a number of landmark moments, including the first ever international agreement that promised to phase down coal, and a commitment from leaders of more than 100 countries that cover over 85% of the world's forests to stop and reverse deforestation and land degradation by the year 2030. A massively important step, given that trees absorb huge amounts of CO2. Provost, the rising global temperature affects every single person on the planet, and whether we like it or not, we have all been conscripted as soldiers in the war against climate change. As such, I am delighted that the Conservative budget includes funding for environmental proposals linked to the legacy model of COP26 and to ensure that North Lanarkshire continues to play its part in tackling this hugely pressing issue. Provost, whilst it is welcome that a number of one-off spending proposals can be put forward today, let's not be misled into thinking that this year's budget settlement, or those of the previous years in the Council current term, have been anything other than hugely damaging for the people of North Lanarkshire. The overall savings gap for 2022-23 stands at a whopping £19 million, and the consequence of this depressing financial reality is the imposition of further agonising pain in local services. Over the course of their time in power at Holyrood, SNP decision-making in local finance has produced hugely negative outcomes when it comes to core council funding and service provisions, with savings in the region of £300 million being required to deliver balanced budgets in North Lanarkshire. This is certainly not fair, nor is it sustainable, with local people forced to pay ever-increasing amounts of council tax, but for the provision of fewer and fewer services. Let's not forget that the hurricane of SNP cuts has occurred during a period where the Scottish Government's own budget has experienced significant increases each year from the UK Government. Indeed, in the past year, the UK Government delivered record block grant funding, but the Scottish Government still decided to inflict a massive £250 million real terms funding cut on councils. Provost, the SNP refused to provide councils with the money needed to fund vital local services. But despite this, they can somehow come up with the cash when it comes to funding preparations for a second divisive referendum. It tells you all you need to know about the Nationalists' priorities. Local councils and the day job of devolved governance last, breaking up the country first. Shameful, but that's what we've come to expect from the SNP. To stop this, we urgently need a new approach towards the funding of local authorities in Scotland. No longer should it be considered acceptable that North Lanarkshire and the budgets of the other 31 councils in Scotland can be raided at a whim by a detached and centralist SNP government in Edinburgh. In December 2020, I was delighted when a majority of councillors voted through the Conservative group motion in my name, which supported proposals to enshrine fair council funding in law. The legislation would result in councils receiving a set proportion of the Scottish Government budget each year, and it would bring to an end the disastrous treatment that the SNP has inflicted on local authorities for far too long. Provost, I second the Conservative budget.
Councillor Beveridge, you put in a point of order.
Yes, Provost. I'm somewhat confused here because the Conservative group, the previous vote was for a 2% increase, and now they're presenting a budget that shows a 3% council tax increase. Could that be clarified, please, Provost?
Okay. What happens is most groups have different levels of budgets, knowing that their level might not go through, so you prepare more than one budget for the level of council tax, and they put in the one with 3% to the officers.
Thanks, Provost. So there's no the 2% increase has not been justified then. Thank you.
We've got another budget amendment. Councillor Hume.
Thanks, Provost.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Cullen, you put in a point of order before I let Councillor Hume in.
That's incorrect, the explanation to Councillor Beveridge, Provost. We proposed a 2% council tax rise that failed. Our budget proposal is a rebate on the agreed council tax rise. It doesn't dictate what the council tax rise would have been. It's a rebate on what was voted through for the council. So in effect, it's a 0% rise for this year, albeit the council tax rise will still be added to the base budget, the base council tax bill.
It equated to a 3% budget. The officers, the finance officers, all have the proposed budgets before to check that they all balance. Councillor Hume.
Thanks again, Provost. Our budget this year is based on the financial position provided to us by the Head of Financial Solutions and takes into account the general revenue grant provided by the Scottish Government and the council tax revenue for 22-23. I am delighted to be able to present a budget motion that allows investment to be made in our services and communities that have faced so many challenges over the 2 years because of the COVID pandemic and the recent and ongoing cost of living rises, including food, energy and fuel. It is a statutory requirement for local authorities to provide a balanced budget where revenue matches expenditure. Because of the level of Scottish Government revenue grant to the Council and the availability of other one-off funds, we are in the welcome position for this year's budget of having £13 million to invest in enhancing council services and improving local communities. However, this must be used in one-off spending, and we cannot choose options that incur ongoing spending. For example, that means improvements rather than new builds. The SNP group based their investment proposals on those areas we felt would be most beneficial to our communities and that local people told us were important to them. We were particularly concerned about the significant cost of living increases across all aspects of people's lives. As we move out of COVID restrictions, this will be another challenge for people to face in the area. We have chosen a number of investment options in our proposals to try and redress these issues.
The SNP group of councillors will always listen to what our local communities think is important and will base our decisions on what they tell us. A full list of investment proposals is included in our budget motion document. However, to highlight some of the details in relation to our stated objectives, we have committed £900,000 to community boards to deliver on the choices that local people have identified are important to them. £1 million to reintroduce swimming lessons for primary 5 pupils over 3 years. As well as the benefits of physical activity and social interaction, the skills the children learn will stay with them in the future. £250,000 to support the work done by community boards to assist those who have been so seriously impacted by the current situation and the impact of future challenges. For example, money can be provided to food banks to support the likely increase in people needing to use them. We included the following options in our proposals. Confirm the council tax will be increased by 3% as agreed. Continue with our commitment to set aside the equivalent of 1% of council tax increase to the Community Investment Fund. We agree to leave the general contingency reserves at 8 million, and we support the council's position on the overall reserves policy. We will continue with our commitment to financial services within the council to develop projected plans to produce balanced budgets for 3 years. From 2022 to 2023, other Scottish Government grant money totalling almost £46 million has been allocated to the council to support many of its service programmes. For example, new house building and buying back council houses. When Labour members promote how good they are about the number of new council house builds and council buybacks, they never mention that a significant part of this money comes from grants from the Scottish Government. We never hear about that from them. Education, including the Pupil Equity Fund and early learning childcare expansion. Again, Labour members mentioned their contribution and commitment to education without ever mentioning the significant number of objectives and programmes that the Scottish Government initiated and paid for within the council. Provided cycling and walking routes to support the active travel initiative. All of these are documented in council financial reports and never mentioned again by either of the other parties. Scottish Government grants will also be provided in the future to support many more programmes, including discretionary housing payments, removal of music tuition charges, free school meals, including a holiday provision. In further recognising the cost of living crisis, your SNP government has committed to deliver a new £150 payment to householders who are either in receipt of council tax reduction scheme or live in a band A to D property. But according to other parties, the Scottish Government never does anything for the people of North Lanarkshire. It's quite sad, really. It is also worth noting the money the Scottish Government spends centrally that everyone in North Lanarkshire benefits from, and again is never mentioned by other parties. Free prescriptions, student tuition, childcare, bus travel, bedroom tax, and many, many more. Everyone in North Lanarkshire benefits from them, but they're never mentioned. It's possible that the cost of living increases will be with us for some time, and it seems likely that more and more people's finances will be under pressure. We hope that everyone at the council will recognise this and commit to working to mitigate these challenges in the future. I have been disappointed but not surprised by the criticism of the Scottish Government by non-SNP members. The points they made are very selective and biased. They never acknowledge the extra money provided by the Scottish Government for programmes that they think will be most beneficial to our communities. Every year, they provide more money to the council to spend on these programmes than the shortfall in the general revenue grant. So the council, every year, the council receives more money from the Scottish Government than it did the previous year. Labour's poor performance in running the council for decades provides no surprise that the Scottish Government decided money could be spent more beneficially than giving it to Labour to waste. Do I need to remind everyone about the £135 million cost of equal pay debacle, which is still not concluded yet, and the incredibly expensive decision to utilise PFI PPP, which will be costing the council exorbitant amounts of money over decades? Good Labour decisions? Not. A recent committee report highlighted that poverty in North Lanarkshire is still increasing. If I ran something that was supposed to deal with an item like poverty and felt and had it confirmed that poverty was on the increase, I would not feel I had done a good job. Labour talks a good game, but the reality is they have not delivered for the people of North Lanarkshire, as is clearly identified by recent benchmarking results, where North Lanarkshire came out poorly placed against other local authorities. That's the reality, folks, not the Labour being the greatest thing out there. So that's Labour's record. What about the Tories? Is it not lamentable that we have a Prime Minister who considers the restrictions he applies to everyone else do not apply to him, and resulted in police investigations at Downing Street? He was also only able to get some of his own policies through with the help of other parties, as his backbenchers did not support him. The Tories have tried to say the Tory government in Westminster is doing a good job. Every aspect of evidence goes against that. In terms of general Tory policy, the imbalance between rich and poor has never been greater. And what does the Tory Chancellor do but increase deductions that hit the poorest people hardest? That's the reality of the situation. Labour talk a good game and don't deliver, and the Tories look after the people that support them, which is not the poorest people community. I propose this SNP motion to the Council.
Thank you very much. And who's seconding this?
That would be me, Provost.
Right. Councillor Linden.
Thank you, Provost. It's my pleasure to follow Councillor Hume seconding our SNP budget today. And can I begin this morning by giving thanks to our finance team here at North Lanarkshire and pay particular tribute to our fantastic Section 95 officer, Elaine Kemp, and to our business finance managers, Kathleen Shearer and Greg Telfer. Their advice and support is invaluable and so often robust. And whilst we may not always like the answers we're given to questions asked, this team act with the utmost professionalism, and their support to those of us involved in making these tough decisions is truly appreciated. So to them, on behalf of the Opposition SNP Group, thank you very much. Provost, our budget today is set against the context of an SNP Scottish Government budget that is bold and ambitious, with a package of public investment that delivers on the priorities which matter most to the people of Scotland and, by extension, North Lanarkshire. The Scottish budget provides stability and support, setting out clearly how we'll accelerate our COVID recovery, and crucially how the Scottish Government spending plans will set Scotland and our communities on a new ambitious path. An ambitious path that will be to the benefit of all, including here in North Lanarkshire. Before turning to the specific items in our budget, a budget bursting with ideas for North Lanarkshire, Provost, I wish to outline some further detail on the 2022-23 local government settlement, a settlement of almost £12.5 billion that's both fair and affordable under the most challenging of circumstances. The 2022-23 Scottish budget provides a core local government finance settlement amounting to £11.1 billion. And in addition to this, there is a further £1.3 billion of revenue currently held by the Scottish Government portfolios added to local government finance settlement, an increase of £791 million this year. That settlement also includes £679 million of capital, including £30 million held in other portfolios. Taken together, this means Scotland's local authorities, such as North Lanarkshire, will receive a total funding package in 2022-23 of £12.4 billion through the local government finance settlement, an increase of £853.9 million. And in a like-for-like comparison with last year, it represents a 7.3% cash terms increase, or 4.5% in real terms. And crucially, reflecting the important role local government plays in delivering the priorities set out by our SNP government in our programme for government, a further £740.6 million will be allocated out with the local government settlement. So to summarise, what does the settlement deliver? Real terms growth to overall settlement, protection to the core budget in cash terms, £500 million of investment in health and social care, £145 million for additional teachers and support staff, £68.2 million for child bridging payments, maintained funding for our 100-day commitments, including the removal of curriculum and music tuition charges, an expanded school clothing grant, and an additional £30 million of capital funding to facilitate the expansion of free school meals. And North Lanarkshire is benefiting from that ongoing investment, Provis. All of this in spite of Westminster Tory cuts. And I counted the mention of Tories, Westminster, UK government, and the Labour speakers, not one mention in any of their speeches of the UK Tory government who are presiding over cuts. And then I wonder why. I listened to Councillor David Cullen of the Tories, and I quote, on savings, the plans put in place by this administration, the Labour one, or the Labour-Tory administration, Provost? That is an important point of clarification, because they speak with one voice, because they are two peas in the same pod. They are inseparable, and the people of North Lanarkshire know it. And then I look at the Tory proposals, and I have to laugh. Half-baked, cutting right through the middle of full-out proposals from officers, giving tokenistic money to things that deserve significant investment. But of course, it wouldn't be a Tory budget if there wasn't £150,000 for parties. We know that Boris enjoys a party, and I'm sure the Tories in North Lanarkshire enjoy one too. I now want to turn, Provost, to our investment, £13 million of proposals. We've long campaigned in the SNP in North Lanarkshire for the return of free swimming lessons for our young people, following the cancellation by the Labour administration, propped up by their friends, of the Primary 5 swimming programme. So we're delighted to deliver on our ongoing commitment to reintroduce that. Our budget, if supported, will see the launch of a new scheme encompassing and delivering a swimming pass for all Primary 5 pupils in North Lanarkshire, providing them with access to free swimming lessons, out with the school day to avoid learning loss, just as teachers are telling us, and supported by free leisure swimming to reinforce their learning. And it's not a one-off commitment, unlike Labour's proposals, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. This is a 3-year programme running from 2022 through to 2025, delivering sustainably for our young people, ensuring they have this valuable skill. Provost, the Community Grant Scheme, as members know, is a small grant scheme, delivering funding in a short timescale to promote projects or activities that are delivered by local people and community groups, bringing community benefit. The scheme involves local councillors assigning limited resources to those who apply to them to deliver on their projects. This SNP group recognises across the board that elected members are at the heart of their communities, and we want to deliver in partnership with them. In our investment plans, we will deliver a 50% increase in funding for elected members' community grants, raising the potential support from £1,735 to £2,602, again, not for 1 year, not for 2 years, but for 3 years, to deliver ongoing and heightened investment to worthwhile community initiatives, recognising the need to support community activity. Indeed, Provost, throughout this budget, communities are the golden thread to the SNP. We recognise that each community in North Lanarkshire is distinct and has differing local priorities. Through the implementation of the Community Board Initiative in North Lanarkshire, we've been able to bring together community partners and local people to try to understand better local needs and desires. That's why in this budget, this SNP group recognise that communities are key to our shared success, and we're proud to be investing £100,000 to every community board across North Lanarkshire. an investment package totalling nearly £1 million. And at the heart of that funding is that the allocation shall be spent in line with local priorities confirmed by community engagement, something other parties get scared of. Meaning this funding for local people shall be issued locally, decided locally and spent locally. Provost, we, the SNP group, recognise that North Lanarkshire, under this administration, again propped up by their friends in the Tory party, have taken poor choices on the environment. From cuts to pest control services and damaging changes to grass cutting, I have to say that no amount of one-off investment will right the wrongs of your decisions. But this SNP group have listened to local people, delivering over £1.5 million of funding for environmental improvements, more than any other party today. It includes the delivery of a further one-off cut to the private land previously maintained by the council, given the poor implementation of the policy. And as we continue to recover from COVID, we will support through the council local people understanding the land is not owned by the council, helping them establish factoring and maintenance requirements moving forward. And it will also continue the very welcome work of Recover NL, which is community-led cleanups, targeted grass cutting, action on fly tipping, pest control activity, and will also continue the Drop the Curb initiative with our communities, country parks, cemeteries and active travel routes to ensure improved accessibility for all. Provost, these are just 4 of the 15 investments that are proposed in this budget, and I want to summarise. From investing in a COP26 legacy to delivering in full, not part-baked, 20-mile-per-hour zones to schools and early learning centres, investing double in the Scottish Welfare Fund than the Labour group are proposing to tackle the cost of living crisis. We'll put our money where our mouth is with apprenticeships at the council. We'll accelerate our town centre plans. We'll invest in community group sustainability. We'll fund £1 million for our much-loved culture and leisure facilities and avoid Labour closures. Inject £1.5 million into pitches and pavilions and provide wraparound offerings for all in the community through community learning and development. This SNP budget is bursting with ambition for North Lanarkshire. Today, elected members have a chance to support a wide-ranging package of support and investment that delivers for all. This is a budget for towns, for communities and our people. This is a budget for all of North Lanarkshire, and I am so very proud to second this SNP budget. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Rorty, you've put in the chat bar.
Yes, Provost, I would probably wish for about a 15-minute recess just so that we can digest everything that's came through from both amendments to have a look over the proposals timely with my group anyway.
Is there any, can I have a seconder for that?
I'll second that, Provost.
Thank you. Is there any otherwise minded? We normally do.
Can I just confirm that the Labour group only need 15 minutes this time, won't be 10 because the deal's already done?
There's no deals been done. We've asked for a 15-minute to read over. It's quite common practice. We can't sit and, because we're working on the screen as well as trying to read them, we take it from there. Michael McPate, you put in a point of order.
Sorry, Provost, I think you should be stronger there. And criticise you, Provost. That is a complete slur. Councillor Lundy just come out there. I would ask he withdraws that remark. Thank you.
To be honest, we know it's inaccurate, so we'll go for a 15-minute recess. Mark, can you put everybody in? I know that there's Elaine's got finance officers available if any group wants a finance officer to come in and check any figures if anybody's proposing any changes. Elaine, if anybody wants one, they'll contact yourself or Mark and you can arrange that.
It's fine, Provost.
So can we get moved into the breakout rooms, Mark?
Provost, I'm just going to start the breakout session just now. After 15 minutes, all elected members will come back into the meeting automatically. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's us back on to the main meeting. Everybody had a chance to read the proposals?
Sorry, just to say that we have a revised proposal, which I think officers have, and I'm happy to articulate.
Elaine, are you quite happy with the revised proposal?
I am, and we will forward it to Mark shortly.
Right, thank you very much. So, is Councillor Hume as your original moving this amendment?
He's welcome to, Provost. It's a very brief amendment, just simply as an addition.
I just am conscious that he was out the original mover of your amendment, and
yep, Jim.
The protocol.
I'd prefer it if Jordan spoke about it.
Archie, you want to make a comment?
Thanks, Provost. Yes, I'm assuming the Councillor Hume and Councillor Linden are referring to Standing Order 35 in terms of moving a fresh motion. I think just for the purpose of the minute and just to keep us all right, can I check that the original motion is being withdrawn with the consent of each? Thanks, Provost.
Yes, to give effect to that, Archie, indeed the revised investment proposal document should now come in place of the original. That's correct. And Provost, it will be brief, just simply that we've lowered the value of the signage to the rate to implement in full the 20 mph zones based on officers' advice, and the balance of which has been allocated to the introduction of that fuel payment to pensioners, which is in the Labour Group budget. And I think, credit where credit's due, we recognise that that is an important initiative to deliver for those in terms of the cost of living crisis.
Thank you very much. Are we ready to go to any contributions? Kirsten, this is when you'll need to keep me right if people come up in the chat bar. Do we have any contributions?
There's nothing so far. Convener, that's coming in now.
You put up a point order.
Yeah, sorry to be pernickety, but I believe following the advice we got earlier, I'm presuming Councillor Linden's proposing motion, he's not actually technically had a seconder. I would hate for us to everything to fall down on a technicality, even though it's not my proposal.
Right,
I just believe
that's
that
fine,
is the case since he withdrew the original motion.
Councillor,
I'm prepared to propose the amended motion after Councillor Linden speaking about the minor changes to it.
so it's the original proposer and seconder. Thank you very much. So have we got anybody any comments on the budgets?
Provost, Councillor Larson would like to speak, followed by Goldie.
Councillor Larson.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, I've heard many contributions here today about how awful the SNP government are, especially in their handling of the public purse. What I've not heard today is a single criticism of the UK government. This seems to be a variation on a theme where every budget or every full council we turn up and we bash the SNP government, but nobody remembers the Labour Party's old enemy, the Conservative Party, not a single mention. And the UK government, Provost, is, in my opinion, a government without any political authority to govern. And it's also my opinion that the SNP government have been nothing short of Olympian in their ability to navigate funding, to mitigate Westminster austerity, and to deliver policies which not only protect the Scottish people, but also encourage them to thrive. There are many examples that I really don't have time to go through, but to name just a few, free bus travel for under 22s, the child payment, which is set to double, the 1140 rollout, universal free school meals to all primary children, to name, as I said, but a few. The SNP are a party who put their civic responsibility front and centre of everything that they do. And locally as well, Provost, our SNP government have delivered tens, if not hundreds of millions in areas such as health, education, transport, housing, infrastructure and justice. Many bold statements have been made today by the Labour and Conservative groups here, but the voting electorate have not yet had their say. This will of course happen on the 5th of May via the ballot box, and I feel certain that the Scottish people will again endorse the same SNP governance. Because whilst the weak and the vulnerable have suffered under COVID and now the cost of living crisis, the UK government have partied, flouting the laws that they themselves imposed on the rest of us, and Labour have been underwhelming. And while these two long-standing parties have lost their moral compass, the SNP have placed, again, their civic duty front and centre of all that they do. Whilst there are some aspects of the Labour budget which I support, such as funding for local pitches, I'm very sceptical as to whether these will truly be delivered. It appears to me that this administration's default position is to let our facilities go to ruin, uncared for, unkempt, no grass cutting, only later to announce that they will be turned into a cemetery, as in the case of Morven Street, or worse still, sold to the highest bidder. Public consultation to this administration has been nothing more than lip service and box ticking. When the SNP, not if, when the SNP are in administration locally, we will listen to our local communities in sincerity and respond to their needs. And Provost, I just want to add that I'm very proud of the budget proposal that has been delivered by our group here today under very difficult circumstances, but not the difficult circumstances that the Labour group have outlined, because whilst things have been difficult, whilst there is a cost of living crisis, whilst we're all recovering from the fallout from Brexit and COVID, we still have money in reserves. We're still able to make considerable investment in infrastructure and capital programmes in local services. And therefore, I just want to say that I'm proud of the budget proposed by my group today. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Goldie.
Thanks, Provost. Just to pick one or two things out of the SNP budget. As part of the members' officers working group on road safety, which was an excellent group, thanks to the work of the officers and people from other parties, I welcome the rolling out of the mandatory 20 miles per hour zones around our schools, committed in the SNP budget, essentially leading to safety for most of our school estate users. Just on the environmental issues, the SNP budget will deliver sustainability projects against our primaries across our primary schools, which is excellent and built on the work of the Council's Act 21 process and the lead up to climate change COP26, and it's excellent to see the ideas coming forward from our primary school pupils, and our budget would be able to implement some of these. And finally, we're also having a budget, a mechanism to deliver another grass cut and offer a funding process for residents who are affected by this. A lot of people don't actually know who owns the land. There's disputes over whether the council should maintain or whether it should be in private ownership. And this would enable us to set up some kind of mechanism for people to identify who is responsible and put things in place, as Councillor London said earlier. And we put these forward all from listening to our communities. Thanks.
Thank you. Kirsten, just to clarify that the next list, I see quite a few names up.
Yeah, Provost, there are quite a few requests to speak. The next three are Councillor Paul Kelly, Councillor Castles and Councillor McPake.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Provost. I'm proud that thanks to this Labour administration's sound financial management of the council, we're able to come forward today with a no-cuts budget that has at its heart supporting our communities through the COVID-19 pandemic and the cost of living crisis. It's also a budget full of ambition for our communities and residents, in keeping with this Labour Council, being the most ambitious in Scotland. And this is all despite the catastrophic £19 million cut to this council by the SNP government in this year alone. Throughout the pandemic, this Labour Council has been on the side of local residents, with numerous initiatives to support residents, businesses and communities. We're committed to supporting communities in recovering from COVID-19 pandemic, with more than £5 million invested through the Tackling Insecurity and Flexible Funds. In this budget, we are seeing record investment in health and social care to make sure our most vulnerable are supported and protected. While the people of North Lanarkshire are facing a cost of living crisis, while both the Tory and SNP governments sit in their hands, this Labour Council and this budget are putting forward plans to support hard-pressed local residents who may be struggling. With vital additional funding to the Council's Scottish Welfare Fund, a pensioner fuel grant to support pensioners who will be struggling with higher fuel bills, and a continuation of the school and early years clothing grants. This, alongside this Labour Council's innovative Club 365, doing all we can to support our young people. This Labour promise in our budget, we will be reinstating the Scottish Attainment Challenge funding. This was disgracefully cut by the SNP government. Vital funding for teachers and projects that help children in some of our most deprived communities. The pandemic has widened the poverty-related attainment gap further, so beggars belief the SNP would choose this moment to make callous cuts to children's education. However, Provost, this Labour Council is on the side of those most in need, and we will in our budget stop this SNP cut. Provost, this Labour budget again supports our ongoing ambitious plans for North Lanarkshire, with thousands of council homes being built and making our economy one of the fastest growing in Scotland. We'll always fight for more investment in North Lanarkshire so residents can have the homes, schools and jobs they deserve. This budget again shows throughout the COVID-19 pandemic and the cost of living crisis, Labour in North Lanarkshire is on residents' side. Our budget is ambitious and crucially supports local residents in these difficult times. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Castles.
Thank you, Provost. The Labour budget is a far stronger, far better budget, and others have discussed that and will discuss it. A couple of points I want to raise. One is about the cuts. 1920, 2.4% cut from the UK government to the Scottish government. That was changed into a 3.2% cut from the Scottish government into the initiatives that they had, which became a 14.7% cut to local authorities, the biggest cut of all. There's mention of 1140, free school meals, buses and prescriptions, the national priorities dictated to by the national government. 1140 cost this council money that wasn't reintroduced to us. It took money away from us. The buses, we have no say on how the buses are run locally. And that's what chilled me about the discussion of the budget. We're a local authority. We are not discussing national priorities, or we shouldn't be. But Councillor Hume just said he was quite happy for the SNP government to take money and to tell a local authority how you should spend that money. Here's the money, here's what you're going to spend with it. It's coming to the point where we'll be lucky to receive 40% of what we need to spend. And Councillor Hume, it's not North Lanarkshire, it's all the 32 councils, including SNP-led councils, who were told how to spend the money. Now that is chilling. That is a nationalisation process of taking over what should be run by local democracy. Councillor Linden, you can talk about local needs and local desires. If you're going to allow 60% of your budget to be dictated to nationally, that's not local needs or local desires. That's not listening to the people. That's listening to the people above you and not turn around and telling them enough is enough. You can't go on like that. You can't go on cutting budgets and pretend that you're not cutting budgets because more money's been given, but you've had to cut the budget, you've had to cut the priorities because you're not getting enough money to do it. We've been enforced spending priorities. There are new initiatives coming in every year and old initiatives that every single council has been told what to spend on. And that's what frightens me. If you're talking about being the next authority, the next people in control, you need to raise your game. You need to waken up and you need to turn around and tell the national government that is not how you run a local authority. And as I said, it's the first time I've actually been sitting in a council meeting where I felt a slight chill about what was being said, an acceptance of a takeover of local government by a national government. That's not acceptable. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor McPake.
Thanks, Provost. I'll try and be very brief. I think Tom Castles has highlighted the situation very well. I mean, throughout the speeches given by the proposer, Jim, and the seconder, goodness sake, Jordan. Sorry, Jordan. I was going to call you Jim there again. All we heard was, all the good that the Scottish Government have done, and we won't criticise the Tories in Westminster. But let me tell you, I'll criticise them. I'll criticise both, because the two of them are the two cheeks of the same bottom, and one's as bad as the other when it comes to giving money to us or taking money away from us and then blaming somebody else. The buck stops here now, and I think that the budget we're putting in front of you today is ambitious in so many different ways. Councillor Goldie mentioned that, I know you probably didn't mean it this way, but as if you're the only ones that are proposing the signage outside schools. It's in our budget as well, so I'll highlight that. Councillor Larson was talking about football fields in Coatbridge, where 2 miles down, not 2 miles down the road, half a mile down the road, we've got a world-class or a national class facility in St Ambrose, where you've got 7 or 8 football fields. Coatbridge has got fantastic sports facilities and more on the way, by the way, with the new campus in Carnbro Primary School. So I'm delighted to see some investment coming to our villages, and especially the investments coming towards Moodiesburn. So I am delighted with that, and so I'll leave it there, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Kirsten, do you want to clarify I'm getting the names in the right order here? If you
The next 3 are Councillor Hogg, Councillor Lennon and Councillor McNally.
Thank you, that's what I had down, but I just thought I would double check. Sometimes you just miss one. Councillor Hogg.
Hi, Provost, thank you. Can I just add to the comments made by Councillor Castles? In terms of decision making locally, we gather together in committees and there is no ideology in those committees. It's set aside. And most of us will do the best that we can to represent our local wards and then look at the bigger picture of North Lanarkshire. We need to be free of ideological posturing, which we've seen this morning, particularly from Councillor Linden, the leader of the SNP. What we've seen recently in the last few years is far more top-down control, emergency powers from Nicola Sturgeon that seem to me to have become dictatorial to the point of almost making local democracy extinct. Our jobs are effectively on the line. And I'm saying this because I'm ideologically free, and I believe that we should move towards, in the longer term, citizens' assemblies or groups like the Community Forum in Cumbernauld, where the councillors ought to go there, get the pulse of the local community and report back to the council for our decision making, and not be trapped by ideology or top-down control. We need more federal government. And the reason I'm saying that is if we get some more money from the Scottish Government, they tie and control us in terms of where that money is to be spent. It is ridiculous that the emergency powers have been kept by Nicola Sturgeon. She is now taking on the role of a dictator in this country. And from what I can see with the Greens and the push towards zero carbon.
Councillor Hogg, we're not here to judge the powers, and that statement you made about Nicola Sturgeon is just not acceptable. That's your view. That's your view. And that's never been, and that has not been included in anything else. So if you can retract that statement and then you can continue what you're saying. I'll let Councillor Linden's asked for a point of order.
Oh, I think Provost, I think you're dealing with it more than adequately. I don't think I need to come in. I think it's pretty clear what the problem is here. It's Councillor Hogg's obsession with the First Minister's use of emergency COVID powers.
Right, that's so. If you could retract that statement and continue with it, we're not here to talk about people's opinions on what's happening through in Edinburgh. We're here to talk about how the funding comes from the other governments down. Is quite acceptable, but We're here to just set a budget for the residents of North Lanarkshire Council today. So if you want, if you can retract that statement and continue.
Sorry, which statement should I retract?
You said that Nicola Sturgeon was a dictator.
Whoa, I'm to retract that. Well, okay, I'll retract that under your actions, but all I'm saying is that it's affecting our ability to make decisions locally, and therefore it's affecting the democratic accountability of councillors in the role that we make. That's the point. We have a cost of living crisis. The fuel costs are going up, heating costs are going up, food costs are going up, and councillors here and officers do their absolute best to try and maintain the living standards. All I'm saying here is that we are being hampered in doing so, and it's a real shame that ideology comes into what is going on. There are very good councillors and superb civil servants doing their absolute best to improve the living standards, and I don't see them being improved. We're going to try and have to do our best. All of us here would probably have liked to have had no increase in the council tax because of the way that things are going. And I think the finances, if we hadn't had very good accountability from our officers, there would have been more cuts. It's a real shame that both London and Edinburgh are not giving us more money to do our job effectively on behalf of the public that we are meant to serve. Thanks, Provost.
Councillor Lennon.
Provost, thanks very much for letting me in to speak on that. I would like to start, Provost, by highlighting the fact that I will always welcome investment, regardless of whatever that is, to my local ward area. Councillor McPake, the previous speaker and ward colleague, highlighted the fact that a new pitch must be coming to Moodiesburn, and that this investment is obviously one of the key pinnacles of the budget for him. But the reality in that is, Provost, Moodiesburn has been at a lack of investment for decades. We've got 2 local primary schools that are screaming out for investment. We have had graveyard reductions in grass cutting. We've had all these different other issues, and this budget, quite simply proposed today by the Labour administration, does not go far enough for the people of Moodiesburn. And I have to be honest about that. Now, I'll let others do the politicking in the grander scheme for the authority, but when it comes to local ward issues, Provost, I will always speak up for local residents. We have a budget presented today by the SNP that highlights 900,000 going to the community board structure, something that will make a massive impact locally. In addition to that, we'll see a rise in money being provided to local elected members to invest in community projects they think is worthwhile. Again, ambition, Provost, in relation to try and make sure that local community groups have access to the funds that are required to make their areas better. The Labour budget, in my opinion, highlights a lack, or even to a certain degree, a desperation for an election forthcoming, that somehow a football pitch is actually going to win votes come the next council elections. But the reality in that proposal is, Provost, we're outpricing people in that local area. The majority of people will get access to these things will be teams that have the affordability factor. Again, the party of the people, which Labour proceeds to be. Again, the key issue here is that it's a budget that's not looking at what local issues are. And for that reason, Provost, I would have to highlight and ask members to vote the SNP budget. Knowing the rhetoric, knowing what's been said today, the fact it's ambitious and it's for local people, Provost, and that's what I would put forward.
Thank you. Kirsten, do you want to just clarify that I've got the names again next?
Yep. Next I've got Councillor McNally, then Councillor Brandon McVeigh, Councillor Fotheringham, Councillor Barclay and Councillor Curran.
Thank you. Councillor McNally.
Oh, thanks very much, Provost. I'm proud to support the Labour administration's budget today. Throughout my time in the council, I've sat in budget meeting after budget meeting, and we've been forced to take incredibly difficult decisions. More than £300 million cuts recognised by the Accounts Commission, recognised by Spice, cuts which start in London, are turbocharged in Edinburgh, and are placed at our door and the doors of people across our communities, impacting the essential services that we all rely on, and putting jobs at risk. COSLA highlighted this year, without objection from the SNP, that £720 million additional core funding was required this year for councils just to stand still. And the reality is the SNP government budget comes nowhere close to plugging that gap. And as has been seen across the country, councils are having to make incredibly difficult decisions once again. It is only due to the financial prudence of this administration that we are in a position to announce such levels of investment today. So let's look at that budget to help mitigate the cost of living crisis, and with the removal of the energy cap, which is set to send bills spiralling, we're uplifting the Scottish Welfare Fund by £500,000, creating a £475,000 fuel grant to support pensioners at risk of enduring fuel poverty, ensuring that the UK's first early learning and childcare clothing and footwear grant is retained, and ensuring that our wider footwear and clothing grant is protected. We're investing in our sports provision with free passes retained for 11 to 15s and a reduced membership fee for over 60s. And I'm particularly delighted, you'll not be surprised at this, Provost, that Moss End is to receive a state-of-the-art new pitch in this budget. We are building on our commitment to delivering the promise for our care experienced young people. We're investing in footpaths, investing in cemeteries, and many, many more. As has been discussed, Provost, the SNP took the shameful decision, and it was a shameful decision, to cut North Lanarkshire's Scottish Attainment Challenge money. The government is set to cut more than £4 million over the next several years at a time when we must have a laser focus on education recovery and keeping our young people on track. Ministers have chosen to cut over £1 million from SAC money this year. That is something that this Labour administration will not allow to stand. So we are reinvesting that £1 million from our own core budget to help protect our schools and support our young people. Looking at the SNP budget, and I'm pleased that they recognise the position around the pensioner fuel payment, but at a time of a cost of living crisis, it is deeply disappointing that the SNP group have chosen in their budget seemingly to cut the early years clothing grant entirely, because it's not there in their budget. They failed to reverse their government's cut to the SAC budget, so are content for £1 million to come out of our schools this year. They're also no mention there of active teens or active 65 programmes, so I presume that they're going to be cut in the SNP budget as well. Provost, this is the difference. It's a serious budget put forward by this administration versus amendments that frankly don't come up to scratch. Provost, this Labour budget invests in our communities, it supports those in the most needs, it protects our schools, it mitigates the cost of living crisis. It's a strong budget for our communities, and I hope that it's supported when the time comes later on today. Thanks very much.
Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Thank you, Provost. Good morning, colleagues. I'm proud to support the North Lanarkshire Labour budget. I'm proud to support a no cuts, no closures and no compulsory redundancies budget, but I'm proud to support a budget that protects local jobs and services, where we use our Community Investment Fund to generate £40 million a year to look at our regeneration and ambition in North Lanarkshire. That's not just about the fabric of North Lanarkshire, but it's about the people and the skills investment and those jobs and the potential of our young people to make that regeneration happen. Some have said that we don't acknowledge funding from the Scottish Government. Well, in that case, clearly members in this chamber don't listen to what is said at committees, because there is a recognition regularly and it's articulated about the investment that is given from Scottish Government, because it's their job to invest in councils. But sadly, we have found ourselves at the not being prioritised. We've been at the thin end of the wedge when it's come from Scottish Government funding, sadly. I will acknowledge that around a third of the cost of a new council house build comes from Scottish Government, but that means the rest comes from North Lanarkshire, and it comes from North Lanarkshire ratepayers and our ambition and our Community Investment Fund. So I'm happy to acknowledge that third, but our 2/3 takes us further in that ambition. I'm delighted that we are listening to our communities. Our communities have told us that they want to invest in our green spaces, in our parks, in our cemeteries and in our environment. We've got a clear investment programme across those areas. We are demonstrating that we are listening and we're respecting local government. The Scottish Government want to invest in community voice, but not the important role that local government has. We are part of local voice, we are part of community empowerment, but we are being, in many ways, my colleague demonstrated it earlier, nationalised out of a role. That's not me trying to protect my role as a councillor, that's me protecting local democracy, that's me protecting local jobs and local services, because we don't need a further centralised Scotland by those who sit and hurry for Holyrood and pulling all powers into there. We must have grassroots empowerment and a devolving of funding that enables that to happen. I'm proud that we've got an early years clothing grant that enables children to engage in our diverse curriculum. I'm pleased that but saddened that we need to have a school clothing grant, but I'm pleased that we recognise that we need it and we're able to respond to the needs of those young people. We know the cost of living is in crisis for many people, and I'm proud of the fact that we're supporting our vulnerable and through the Scottish Welfare Fund and our pensioners through the fuel grant. We're listening and respecting our communities. We're supporting families who need it most, but we're also giving folk a route to ambition and regeneration in North Lanarkshire, in our house build, in our town centres, in our parks and our green spaces too. We want North Lanarkshire to be the best place to live, learn, work, invest and visit, and our budget represents that. So I am proud to support the no cuts, no closures and no compulsory redundancies, because I'm proud to protect local jobs and services. I'm proud to support the Labour administration budget.
Thank you. Councillor Fotheringham.
Thanks, Provost. Just following on from what a lot of my colleagues have already said, this SNP budget for North Lanarkshire seeks to continue the recovery from COVID, building upon the work being carried out by the SNP government. It's a commitment also moving forward into the elections, our priorities to deliver investment into priority areas such as education, health, social care and also community services. The budget outlines what matters most to our communities. We've listened to the people who work and live in North Lanarkshire. We've listened to what they want and what will make their lives better. We will continue to deliver those most affected by the barbaric Tory cuts to the welfare reform, which the Scottish Government continues to mitigate to a tune of over £100 million per year. The SNP budget commits extra funding, doubling Labour's investment to the Scottish Welfare Fund to assist those in crisis due to the increased living costs and energy price rises. Our constituents are faced with the choice of heating or eating, which I'm sure residents would prefer to do at home rather than attend a Labour-Tory party to get a heat and a meal. I think it was Councillor Wilson, who acknowledged earlier that they were kicking the can down the road with a 2% council tax rise. Council tax this savings, he acknowledged, would have impacts next year, but they were doing what they could in the meantime, or words to that effect. But they were also saving in reserves. How can that be done? You know, it's a typical reflection of Tory policy, where they're expecting people to save whilst on the universal credit. So out of touch with reality. We've also supported the vital community groups, including food banks, who have worked tirelessly through the pandemic and continue to do so during this COVID recovery. We're delivering on our ongoing commitment to reintroduce swimming lessons for primary 5 pupils. Parents are currently fundraising and have even set up crowdfunders to raise funds needed to get their kids to swimming lessons. Parents and teachers recognise the importance of keeping our youngsters safe around water. Water safety and learning to swim is a life skill. It was previously said by this opposition group that it was not a council responsibility to keep our children safe around water. This group understands the role it has in protecting young people and ensuring that there is no unnecessary deaths by drowning due to swimming lessons being removed. We believe all our children should receive an equal chance. We continue to support communities' access, active and creative communities, ensuring that everyone has an equal chance to leisure and cultural experiences. Swimming pools, gyms, libraries are all at the heart of our communities, and yet they've been the hardest hit with closures during the pandemic. We will provide additional resources to ensure that everyone can access services, whether that be the chat in the library, which might be the only conversation that they have that day, accessing a computer or supporting services and accessing services such as Macmillan. Leisure facilities too are a lifeline for many, not just for keeping fit, but to answer Councillor McNally's question, yes, the SNP is investing in the 65+ programmes. It's important not just for keeping fit, but improving mental health or accessing the range of special activities. We've got active health, cardiac rehab, people who've had falls, cancer, COPD, basically people in there improving their health and their life chances. Let's give these facilities the chance to be buzzing once again, not just to tart them up with a new branding and a paint, but the money, put it where it's needed and support the people to use the centres and the libraries again. This is what our communities have told us and what we can deliver for them, particularly in COVID recovery, when health and particularly mental health of communities has suffered and needs to be a priority. We're investing in apprenticeships and in youth in our communities who've been greatly impacted during this pandemic. We're investing in our local pitches and increasing councillor community grants to support all our local groups and projects. We're increasing funding to community boards to ensure that local priorities are also delivered. We continue to listen to our constituents, and our budget reflects your wants and your needs, including the grass cutting, action on fly tipping, pest control, improved and safer parks and open spaces, active travel links too, which my colleagues have and will still speak about. We continue to stand up for the people of North Lanarkshire, ensuring your voices are heard, and this budget reflects this ongoing commitment, and I'm very proud to support this SNP budget. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Barclay.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be very short on this because my colleague, Councillor Fotheringham, has been much more eloquent on things than I could have been. One of the things that really has disappointed me about the Labour budget is there's absolutely no mention of the 18 apprenticeships. Talk about wanting to invest in our young people, but that has been missed out completely within their budget, whereas we have got it in ours. I wasn't surprised with the Conservative budget. There really is absolutely no ambition whatsoever. And really, I think the least said about it, the better. Also, for our budget is investing within the community boards, giving them more money so that decisions can be made locally. And it's up to the local people and the community boards how they spend that money. I'm just not to making any comment on about the Platinum Jubilee events, but really that should be a matter for community boards to decide how their funding goes, and to ring fence that, for to give each area 8,500 to create a party really at the moment when other things are really more important to the communities that we live in. So all I could do is really commend our budget for looking after the people within our communities and listening to the communities that we all serve and want to look after. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Curran.
Thanks, Provost. We're hearing a lot about promises and delivery. 15 years ago, the SNP government promised to get rid of the unfair council tax. Delivered nothing. They promised to reduce ring fencing. Remember the Concord Act with local government that we cut back? Now we've got freely admitting Jim Hume saying that they don't trust local authorities, not just Labour local authorities. Every local authority in Scotland has been virtually told, we'll decide what your priorities are, not you. Clothing grant, I'm glad to see that's coming in, and by God, the kids will need it. They'll need heavy jumpers and jackets, because the First Minister's solution to ventilation is open the windows and cut a bit off the door. So maybe we'll have to provide saws to teachers to take that out. 20 teachers getting lost because of Tory Scottish SNP cut. As far as the apprenticeships concerned, this council supports Routes to Work, and I would suggest that all the members have a read at the Routes to Work annual report, and you'll see the support we give to young people, and we have been for the last 20 years. So the promises the SNP have made, I could add on hundreds more, bonfire of all these outside bodies that promised that, never delivered it. In fact, see in the council tax, they adopted Tory party policy by capping the amount of money any council could raise by council tax. They froze it and then they capped it. It reminds me of Maggie Thatcher, the days of capping the council tax as it was then. It wasn't the council tax, it was rates. They capped the rates. If the council spent any more money or tried to raise any more money in the rates, then they took the money directly back off you. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Does anybody remember that for the last few years? We've forgot about that. So our budget is well thought out and a remarkably good budget, given we had to cut £19 million off our current year's finances. Thank you.
Kirsty, first I can apologise to Kirsty. I think I've been calling you Kirsten all day.
That's fine, Provost.
I suppose that sometimes we've all been called a lot worse. Like changing your first name. Have you got any more speakers?
I've got 3 more speakers. I've got Councillor Tom Johnson, Councillor O'Rourke, Councillor Graham.
Thanks very much. Councillor Tom Johnson.
Thank you, Provost. I've been to quite a few of these budget meetings now, and what you always notice is that the Labour Party never attack the Tories at all. That's why they're down to 1 MP in Scotland. They never attack the Tories. And there's a reason for that, of course. They depend on the Tories to get their budget through every year. And we go through this business that was alluded to earlier, where we have this 15-minute recess, where very complicated budgets magically come together from Labour and Tory. And magically, the SNP room is never approached by a Tory spokesman saying, do you want to consult about the budget? It's never approached by a Labour spokesman saying, do you want to consult about the budget? It's never approached by a Labour spokesman saying, we'll need to get together here because we're worried the Tories are going to come in and vote for the SNP budget. It's always a 15-minute recess for complicated work, and miraculously the Labour budget goes through with the Tory support. So that's the background to these things. The other thing we've got to remember, and again this has been alluded to, that the SNP government plays a huge part in local government through, there's just a whole list of things that happen in North Lanarkshire. The housing convener referred to it there, where when you build a council house in North Lanarkshire, at least a third of the cost comes from the Scottish Government. When you buy into private developments for council housing, the Scottish Government provides a big percentage of the cost of the house. When you buy back property for housing, again, there's a Scottish Government grant into that. If you look at, for instance, the Heaps development, that's where lots of houses are getting insulation. That's the houses with the single brick housing, and they're getting smart rough casting on the outside. That is all done by the Scottish Government. And of course, nobody in North Lanarkshire puts up a sign saying done by the Scottish Government. They keep quiet about the things that are done by the Scottish Government. When it comes to Club 365, the last time we looked, about 27% of the cost of Club 365 for holiday hunger was provided by the Scottish Government. Free school meals come into that background. The education convener was talking about cuts on SAC, the Scottish Attainment Challenge. What he forgets to say, of course, is that only about 10 Scottish local authorities in the most deprived areas were given this money. And the money hasn't been cut overall. What's happened is other local authorities have been brought in to spread it a little bit more wider for deprivation. So again, that's money provided by the Scottish Government. PEF money is provided hugely to the authorities with a lot of deprivation. And again, North Lanarkshire, being about the third most deprived authority in Scotland, benefited hugely, disproportionately from that fund as well. Free school meals comes into this category. Many schools were built with Scottish Government money. The local school beside myself, Cumbernauld Academy, 60% Scottish Government funding, so was Greenfalls High. So this much maligned Scottish Government is providing huge amount of money. You're now getting £20 million for new family learning centres. Again, we've got one in my ward in Cumbernauld Village, again provided in the whole 1140 hours scheme, the great support for looking after young children and infants at nursery stage. That's all money coming from the Scottish Government. It's providing huge amounts of service to local authority services. Thank you.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Thank you, Provost. That's a new one to me, that from Councillor Johnson. Money is not cut, it's spread more widely. That'll do a hell of a comfort for our school children who won't be receiving it. In response to the comments about not criticising the Tories, I want to condemn the Conservative government and the SNP national government. In addressing the cost of living crisis, there was a motion put forward to put a windfall tax on energy companies that would help pay for these, to cap the energy prices. But where were these parties? None of the two of them supported it. Well, I'm happy to criticise both of them, particularly the Tories, but also the SNP who abstained on that. But moving on to our local budget proposals. Once again, we've got an SNP produce a glossy brochure that has now been replaced by one sheet after they've realised that the Labour budget is a just budget. And so they've amended theirs. But what's also missing from their budget is the replacement of the 1.025 million that Councillor McNally spoke of from North Lanarkshire Scottish Appointment Challenge. Now that's been spread more widely, it's not been cut according to Councillor Johnson. But that 1.025 million equates to 20 teachers' salaries. 20 teachers been made redundant from North Lanarkshire schools. The Labour budget replaces that and it keeps the 20 teachers in employment. Instead, the SNP, amongst other offers, are cutting grassland that we don't own, meaning tax money from every council taxpayer in North Lanarkshire is going to subsidising residents of these areas to keep their common areas tidy. That's real priorities. I'm supporting the Labour budget. Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Provost. Once again, we are involved in the annual round of Punch and Judy politics, or as I've said previously, the annual festival of excrement, without really addressing the substantive issues. It does nothing for our local communities. A lot of the grandstanding we witness here in the chambers. It is absolutely, or the virtual chamber, it is absolutely nothing. On the subject of cuts, the cuts are undoubtedly start their journey in London, but they're delivered by Edinburgh. Very little at times mitigating measures. So much for local democracy. And as some of my colleagues have mentioned earlier on, the SNP pay lip service to local democracy. There's one thing that has been a growth in the last 14 years, a growth in food banks. So much for the SNP tackling poverty. Now, essentially, and I say this with some concern. However, essentially the SNP are a diluted version of the Tories, the Conservatives, but with some progressive elements. And some of the progressive elements are certainly, I would suggest, on this call today. Our budget offers hope for our communities and it offers hope for a better future. Let's support the Labour budget and deliver for our communities. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Kirsty, I only see one other speaker. Councillor Watson, can you clarify that?
Yeah, that's right, Provost.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Provost. I mean, there's some merit in all the budgets, and had all the parties contributed openly with each other, then the residents in North Lanarkshire would have been much better served. I have actually waited until the end of the chat bar before, well, I see Ian McNeill is in too, but I had waited till the end of the chat bar before putting anything in. But the Conservative group would like to ask for a 15-minute recess. Thanks, Provost. You're on mute, Provost.
And what's the purpose of the recess?
Well, there's been so many different things discussed with the new SNP amendment that we would like a recess to go over things and have a look at our situation.
Have you got a seconder for that?
Happy to second it, Provost.
Is anybody otherwise minded? If nobody's otherwise minded, then we can go for a 15-minute recess.
Provost, forgive me for not coming through the chat bar. I'm just, would it not be of interest for members to finish their contributions first before any further negotiation is undertaken? Because inevitably members will then come back with yet further contributions on further negotiations. So surely members should finish their contributions and then we should make any final decisions before voting. Forgive me, Provost, I don't mean to teach you or instruct you, but I think
It's
that may be
just
best.
because the request was made at this time and
Yep.
I think Councillor Watson thought he was going to be he was last in the list, and then another couple have come in. Councillor Watson, well, let's hear the other two speakers that are on the chat bar, and then we'll come back.
I'm fine with that, Provost, no problem there. Thanks.
Councillor McNeill and then Councillor Damasio, and then we'll go for a 15-minute recess. Councillor McNeill.
Thanks, Provost. I supported Labour's administration's budget. But let's first of all think about the 3% increase in the council tax, which will allow a fantastic programme of works. Yet the Airgun Shots SNP retweeted criticism of other councils who had a 3% increase just yesterday. Double standards by the SNP, not for the first time. If we think about the Labour administration budget and the Scottish Attainment Challenge in particular, Labour are putting in £1 million to protect the jobs of 20 teachers cut by the SNP. Yeah, they're proposing to cut 20 teachers. Amazing. Councillor Tom Johnson talks about a budget recess. I think it was 2 years ago under his leadership, the SNP forgot to bring their budget to the meeting. We had a recess to allow them to get one. Today they accept our budget proposal rather than their own. Next year, if the SNP want, we will get a Labour budget to them before the meeting, as they present a dog's dinner of a budget in opposition every single year. Their incompetence knows no bounds. Shiny leaflets don't hide it. They just don't know what they're doing. Their only consistency is to cut the services of Scottish local authorities. Cuts to councils are cuts to communities. Only Labour protects the vital services for the people of North Lanarkshire. As Councillor Hogg states, the SNP in Edinburgh are obsessed with control. SNP in North Lanarkshire have today articulated they're happy to be controlled by Nicola from Edinburgh. Good local outcomes are achieved by good local decisions taken by locally elected councillors. North Lanarkshire Labour seek to empower local communities. Only by passing this Labour budget can North Lanarkshire Council continue to support the people to achieve what's best for our local communities. New schools for all pre-1996 buildings. Scotland's largest social housing landlord building a record number of houses. Town centre hubs and town centre record investments. Scotland's fastest growing local economy. All thanks to this Labour administration. That's why the people of North Lanarkshire will re-elect a Labour administration in the local elections in May. Thanks, Provost.
Councillor Damasio.
Thank you, Provost. Excuse me, I'll clear my throat. Firstly, can I thank the other parties for presenting their budget proposals? Thank the Tories for their one-page document and Labour for their 3 pages. So, however, obviously made short reading. I hope the administration, Labour, councillors and their Tory partners in North Lanarkshire managed to read the 17-page SNP document provided. The councillors and administration, Labour administration and Tory benches refer to the block grant from the Scottish Government. Could I remind you all, shamefully, after decades of Labour mismanagement and underfunding Scotland-wide, and specifically here in North Lanarkshire, in particular, including lack of house building and improvement to our public services, public facilities, and our town centres. Make no mistake, it's taken the Scottish Government to prioritise additional funding over and above the block grant funding. Just as one example, over £100 million in the last 4 years alone, just to make possible the building of new council homes, somewhere in the region of 1,100 in North Lanarkshire. That is down to Scottish Government funding. We also have regeneration projects throughout North Lanarkshire, either carried out, underway, or in planning. Once again, these are only made possible because of hundreds of millions of pounds of targeted Scottish Government funding to improve the community facilities, infrastructure and housing stock in North Lanarkshire, down to Scottish Government funding. This SNP budget delivers for our communities. It delivers the likes of football pitches, apprenticeships, bringing back free swimming lessons for our young people, improvements to culture and leisure facilities, extra community grant funding, new funding to the value of 900k for our local community boards to make local decisions on funding, decisions made on the ground by local people, for local people. This SNP group listen to our communities and to our constituents. I would encourage those on the other benches and those no longer representing or not representing a political party to back the SNP budget. The SNP budget is the only budget which will provide local decisions, making and delivering for our local communities. I encourage you all to back the SNP budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark, can you put everybody into the breakout rooms for 15 minutes, please?
Will do, Provost. Thank you.
That's it. Everybody back in. Councillor Watson, you've had your 15 minutes recess as requested. Councillor Cullen, you again, as Archie asked earlier on, is understanding order 35.
Yes,
That's fine.
Right.
Provost Mark sending round our amended amendment in a similar vein to the exercise carried out earlier with the SNP when they recognised sort of good things that are in other people's budgets, and sort of taking on board what Sandy mentioned just before the recess, that if we all work together, maybe the interest of the people in North Lanarkshire would be better served, because by and large, the list of proposals we've got, there's very little in it that's political. And there might be some in it that people are using to buy political points, but there's very little in it that's political. We have, during the course of the discussion, reviewed our amendment, and in anticipation of there being good ideas in the other two budgets of both the SNP and Labour, we had, you'll note on our original amendment, we had kept a reserve at the bottom, because we knew there would be ideas in there that we could potentially take on board and support in the absence of any joint budget with either political party. So our amendment that's been sent round, you'll see still balances at £13 million. Crucially, it still maintains that we would be the only party today that, although we are supportive of a council tax rise, it's been voted at 3%, our £13 million one-off funding would be used to rebate that to residents in full, so that it still sits on their baseline bill. We know it will come on next year, but the cost of living rise is here and now, and we're the only party to recognise that through a rebate of the council tax rise. But in addition, what we've done is we've made some adjustments to the values attached to some of our proposals, and we've used our reserve to take on board all three of the leisure proposals proposed by Labour. That's the proposal around free access for children in care, the proposal around free access for 11 to 15-year-olds, and the proposal around £50 gym membership for over 65s. In addition to that, and in recognition of what Nathan had mentioned earlier, the COP25 proposal, we had originally anticipated £238,000 in that from the officer proposal for schools. We recognise that Labour have got a more ramped up version of that could incorporate both. So we've deleted our 238 and we've taken on board the 700 that Labour had proposed for around the climate change issues that exist within North Lanarkshire. Additionally, and in the interest of cross-party working, we also recognise that in the SNP budget, there is a proposal in there around elected member grants. Similarly to the SNP, we've got a proposal in our budget around recognising the working community boards. If we created them, let's give them the means to make a difference in their local areas. But additionally to that, we recognise that elected members want to work with local communities, and sometimes the direct grant gives us an opportunity to explore relationships at probably levels we don't always get to explore. So we've added that into our amendment as well. Thank you, Chair.
Who's seconding your amendment?
I'll second it, Provost.
Right.
Just following on from what
You know, when it's an amendment like that, earlier on we only let one speaker in on it, so we've all got the amendment.
Okay, that's fine.
Is there any comments now that we've got the amendment, or are we happy to go to the wind up and summing up in the Kirsty, sorry. I don't see anybody else in the chat bar.
No, Provost, we've got no other requests to speak at the moment.
So we'll move to the summing up. So first of all, it'll be Councillor Hume. And it's not 10 minutes for summing up, it's only 5. Just for the 3 speakers that are about to come on.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be as brief as I can.
Councillor Hume, you must have it back on to mute. I don't know if anybody else can hear you, but I can't hear you at all.
No, I don't know why that happened, Provost.
It happens, it can be quite temperamental sometimes.
Right, okay. Right, thank you. Sorry about that. I'll start from the beginning again in case anyone didn't hear it. Blaming the Scottish Government for all their own failures is a constant theme from the other parties. In fact, the reality is, give them more money and they waste it. We never hear from the other parties which Scottish Government programme should stop to give more money to the local authorities. They say we play petty politics. They are masters at it. The reality is, the Scottish Government is aware of their poor performance and quite rightly decided to ring-fence money to spend on crucial programmes that benefit all our communities. And let me reiterate, every year the Council gets more money from the Scottish Government than the reduction in the General Revenue Grant. The Labour motion says it provides support for local residents. In fact, if they want a budget that really supports our communities, they should have contacted the SNP to adopt our budget, which really delivers on this priority. Labour comments re the takeover of local government by national government is based on making the best use of available funds to give the most benefit to our communities. Can I remind everyone about the introduction of community boards, community investment funds and participatory budgeting, which ensures local voices are given the opportunity to decide on truly local investments? It seemed to me that Labour was saying we need to make local decisions, but the local decisions should be made by Labour councillors. That's completely opposite from what the SNP think and their initiatives to diverse decision-making to truly local bodies. I can also confirm that no SNP budget would have resulted in compulsory redundancies. Again, Labour comments try to suggest that they are the only ones who considered this to be important. The SNP budget delivers the most relevant and beneficial proposals for all our local communities, and I am very happy to propose it again to the Council.
Councillor Cullen.
Thank you, Provost, and I don't intend to take up too much time of the 5 minutes. I'll take up 2 or 3. The Scottish Conservative and Unionist group have spent the last 4 years in this chamber working in the best interests of all residents in North Lanarkshire at a local level. That's evidenced in our budget proposal today to rebate people the council tax rise. It helps the council in the future, but actually mitigates the cost of living rise in this year. We have listened to what is akin to the pre-recorded nationalists in this chamber tell us that they'll take no lectures from the Tories about every conceivable issue. Well, I'll tell you this, the Tories in this chamber will take no lectures from any nationalists that continue to peddle the myth that the cuts experienced by the people of North Lanarkshire, despite record and unprecedented funding from the United Kingdom government, lie anywhere other than the nationalist Scottish government. The SNP mentioned earlier that we never give them credit or never acknowledge any of the good work carried out in the name of the Scottish government. They never acknowledge the wider benefit of being part of the United Kingdom, irrespective of the government in Westminster. Scotland benefits from being a member of the United Kingdom. On a final note, colleagues, the SNP claim to have surveyed the views of the local residents in the production of their budget. I've been made aware of a recent survey by MSPs Claire Adamson and Marion Fellows where the following objective question was posed. How do you generally feel about the way North Lanarkshire deals with issues in this area? And there were 3 options. Option 1 was angry. Option 2 was concerned. And option 3 was not bothered. Obviously, those that ticked option 3 were going into the database that MP Alan Smith keeps referring to. This was raised by members of the Scottish Parliament, apparently as a precursor for their Indirect 2 question set that will read, should Scotland be an independent country with 3 possible options? Yes, a lot.
Yep, Councillor Cullen.
Yes, a little.
Councillor Cullen.
Or not sure, but yes, anyway.
Councillor Cullen, you've introduced a new business in.
Apparently all done in the name of lawful democratic.
Councillor Cullen, I'm going to...
I'm finished, Provost, I'm finished.
Because you introduced new
I'm finished,
business,
but no,
which you're
all
not
I'm
allowed to do.
I was trying to introduce the objectivity of...
It doesn't matter, it's new business, and you've been here nearly 5 years, and you should know that you're not meant to introduce new business at that stage. Councillor Linden, you put in a point of order.
I think you've dealt with it, Provost, frankly. Don't think there's anything else to add.
Councillor Logue.
Thanks very much, Provost. I mean, I'm very conscious of the time. It reminds me of one of the first budgets in North Lanarkshire when we were in the chamber. And at this juncture, the Provost reminded all colleagues that the soup was getting cold. And we're at that stage just now. So I'll try and be relatively brief. Can I say that I address my first comments to Jim Hume. Jim, I've tremendous respect for you, but today I found some of your comments personally offensive. I mean, to say that the Scottish Government shouldn't give money to local authorities because they waste it, that is an appalling statement, and I think you should reflect on it. I mean, go and read the Audit Scotland report. Read what Audit Scotland said about North Lanarkshire. Why are you coming out with that? In terms of that we don't respect the role of Scottish Government, we don't respect that they give us money. Yes, we do. And Councillor Heather Brand-McVeigh articulated that very well. I mean, we're well aware that they give over 80% of our funding. We're well aware of that. Where we have an issue are in two aspects. One, that as spies indicate, the UK government has cut the Scottish Government budget by 1.8. The Scottish Government has cut the budgets of councils by 7.1. That's a disproportionate cut to councils. And that is the argument that we say over and over again. And the next point, and it was touched on by Councillor Castles, and that is that the Scottish Government cut our budget, recycle that money as a directed spend, and that directed spend is to resource the policies and priorities of the Scottish Government. It undermines the legitimacy of councils. It brings in a centralisation agenda. And I don't think any of us in this call want to see an increasing centralisation agenda, as we've seen recently with the announcement of the National Care Service. So let's be very careful what you wish for. He then, Jim, went on to talk about a few what he saw as perceived mismanagement in North Lanarkshire. He talked about equal pay. That was a very poor choice, Jim, because at the present time, what we've seen in George Square, we're seeing employees out there marching because of the fiasco in George Square. Councillor Kirsten Larson talked about the SNP have got a moral compass and wouldn't mismanage budgets. And I'm sitting here just now and reflecting. There's an announcement come out from the Scottish Government today that the Cabinet Secretary for Education has given £36 million to a school for special reasons. You won't be surprised when I tell you that school is Dunfermline High. And where is Dunfermline High? It's in the constituency of Shirley and Somerville. And you talk to me about moral compass? And then also, I was just reflecting as well.
Councillor Linden's put in a point order, and I know what the point order is going to be.
Well, there should be a point of order during the summing up, Provost.
There can be a point of order at any point, Provost. I'm sure the Leader of the Council is aware of the standing orders. I'm sure he's read them and understands them. Provost, the obvious point to mention is that once again, there is new information being mentioned. And also, can I hesitate to add, Provost, that the allegation that the Leader of the Council is potentially making against the Cabinet Secretary in direct contravention of the Ministerial Code is a very serious allegation to make. And he is on the record, so he should reflect on whether or not he wants to be on the record, making an allegation against a minister, breaking the Ministerial Code. It's a very serious matter indeed, and I think there'll be some legal ramifications accordingly.
As I said to Councillor Cullen, you're far more experienced than he is. I didn't think at the start of this I had to say to anybody summing up that they couldn't introduce new business. Only what was in the debates throughout.
I'm responding to the claims of financial mismanagement by North Lanarkshire Council about the SNP moral compass, that they would not do that. They wouldn't align themselves to that. That is the context.
Let's concentrate on what's in the budget.
You're interrupting. That is the context.
Councillor Logue, I'll take the meeting.
It's a legitimate context.
Councillor Logue, I will make a judgment on whether you're introducing new business. You were introducing new business because you were going to another local authority area. So let's stick to North Lanarkshire.
Look, I'm not going to prolong this. I wasn't going to another area. I was talking about the Scottish Government. But anyway, can I just say that clearly...
Councillor Bartley's now put in for a point of order.
Lotus am to do this, and it's really, I don't do point of orders, as you know, Provost. But really, I think it's really unincumbent of elected members to be arguing with you in your position as Provost. You make a ruling, and really it's up to us as elected members to abide by that ruling. Thank you.
That's rich coming from a member of the SNP group. Anyway, can I just finish up by saying... Can I just finish by saying I'm very proud to move this motion today. I believe it's a radical budget. It addresses resource gaps which have been identified. It addresses unmet needs of the services which North Lanarkshire Council is responsible. And in addition, for all the reasons which have been articulated by colleagues in my group, I move this motion.
Thank you. Can we move to the vote, Mark?
Thank you, Provost. The first vote will be between the motion put forward and the amendment first received by the Conservative group, which was subsequently amended during the course of the meeting. Councillor Anderson, thank you, Provost. Councillor Anderson is an apology. Councillor Ashraf. Councillor D. Ashraf, sorry, apologies. Okay, move on. Councillor Jai Ashraf.
Abstain.
Councillor Baird.
The new version. My name's Simon.
Councillor Baird, there was a bit of interference there.
Dropshipping store.
Right, I've got that as an abstain, Councillor Baird. Councillor Barclay.
Abstain.
Councillor Beveridge.
Motion.
Councillor Branley McVeigh.
Motion.
I'll go back to Councillor D. Ashraf if you don't mind. He's put in the chat bar. Councillor D. Ashraf.
Abstain.
Thank you. We'll now move on to Councillor Burgess.
Amendment.
Councillor Burrows.
Motion.
Councillor Cameron.
Amendment.
Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Carricker. Councillor Carson.
Motion.
Councillor Castles.
Motion.
Councillor M. Coyle is an apology. Councillor S. Coyle. Councillor S. Was that abstain, Councillor Coyle? Sorry, come back to Councillor Coyle. Councillor Cullen.
Amendment.
Councillor Curran.
Motion.
Councillor Curry is an apology. Councillor Damasio.
Abstain.
Councillor Docherty.
Motion.
Councillor Doolan.
Motion.
Councillor Douglas.
Amendment.
Councillor Duffy.
Motion.
Councillor Fannin is an apology. Councillor Farouk. Councillor Farouk. Move on to Councillor Feeney as an apology. Councillor Fisher.
Motion.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Abstain.
Councillor Gallagher.
Amendment.
Councillor Goldie.
Abstain.
Councillor Goldsack. I think Councillor Goldsack is on the meet. Councillor Gourley.
Motion.
Councillor Graham.
Motion.
Councillor Hogg.
Motion.
Councillor Hume. Councillor Hume.
My apologies, Mark. I've had IT issues there.
Thank you, Councillor Escoyle.
Did you catch mine, Mark?
It's an abstain from Councillor Hume and from Councillor Escoyle. Thank you. Councillor Johnston. Councillor C. Johnston.
Abstain.
Councillor T. Johnston.
Abstain.
Councillor Jones.
Motion.
Councillor Paul Kelly.
Motion.
Councillor Peter Kelly.
Motion.
Councillor Kerr.
Abstain.
Councillor Larson.
Abstain.
Councillor Lennon.
Abstain.
Councillor Linden.
Abstain, please, Mark.
Councillor Logue.
Motion.
Councillor Loughran.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor.
Abstain.
Councillor McGowan.
Abstain.
Councillor Masterton.
Abstain.
Councillor McCulloch.
Motion.
Councillor McKendrick. Not sure if Councillor McKendrick's still on the meeting. Councillor McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor McManus.
Abstain.
Councillor McNally.
Motion.
Then move on to Councillor McNeill.
Motion.
Councillor McPake.
Motion.
Councillor McVeigh.
Motion.
Councillor Mooney.
Motion.
Councillor Morgan.
Motion.
Councillor O'Rourke.
Motion.
Councillor Pettigrew. Councillor Pettigrew. We'll move on to Councillor Quigley.
Motion.
Councillor Redding.
Motion.
Councillor Rorty.
Motion.
Councillor Shevlin.
Motion.
Councillor Shields.
Motion.
Councillor Stephen.
Abstain.
Councillor Stevenson.
Motion.
Councillor Stokes.
Abstain.
Councillor Stubbs.
Abstain.
Councillor Alan Valentine is an apology. Councillor Annette Valentine.
Abstain.
Councillor Watson.
Amendment.
Councillor Weir is an apology. Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
And finally, Councillor Woods.
Motion.
Thank you. The motion attracted 35 votes. The amendment attracted 7 votes, and there are 24 abstentions. The motion is carried.
Thank you. And can we move on to the next vote now, Mark?
Thank you, Provost. We'll now move on to the motion and the amendment second that was put in second, subsequently amended at the meeting. Councillor Anderson is an apology. Councillor Diashraf.
Amendment.
Councillor Jai Ashraf.
Amendment.
Councillor Baird. Councillor Barclay.
Amendment.
Councillor Beveridge.
Motion.
Councillor Branny McVeigh.
Motion.
Councillor Burgess.
Abstain.
Councillor Burrows.
Motion.
Councillor Cameron,
Abstain.
Councillor Campbell,
Motion.
Councillor Carricker,
Amendment.
Councillor Carson,
Motion.
Councillor Castles,
Motion.
Councillor M. Coyle is an apology, Councillor S. Coyle,
Amendment.
Councillor Cullen,
Abstain.
Councillor Curran,
Motion.
Councillor Curry is an apology, Councillor Damasio,
Amendment.
Councillor Docherty,
Motion.
Councillor Doolan,
Motion.
Councillor Douglas,
Abstain.
Councillor Duffy,
Motion.
Councillor Fannin is an apology, Councillor Farouk I don't think is on the meeting. Then move on to Councillor Fisher,
Motion.
Councillor Fotheringham,
Amendment.
Councillor Gallagher,
Abstain.
Councillor Goldie,
Amendment.
Councillor Goldsack I don't think is on the meeting. Councillor Gourley, Councillor Gourley, I think you're still mute, Councillor Gourley. Move on to Councillor Graham.
Sorry about that. Motion.
Thank you, Councillor Gourley. Now move on to Councillor Graham.
Motion, Mark.
Thank you. Councillor Hobb,
Motion.
Councillor Hewitt,
Amendment.
Councillor C. Johnston,
Amendment.
Councillor T. Johnston,
Amendment.
Councillor Jones,
Motion.
Councillor Paul Kelly, sorry,
Motion.
Councillor Peter Kelly,
Motion.
Councillor Kerr,
Amendment.
Councillor Larson,
Apologies, I hadn't realised we've moved on and I'm not sure how I'm voting.
there is a motion put forward on the administration group's budget and an amendment which was subsequently amended by the SNP group.
Amendment, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lennon,
Amendment, Mark.
Councillor Linden,
Amendment.
Councillor Logue,
Motion.
Councillor Loughran,
Motion.
Councillor McGregor,
Amendment.
Councillor McGowan,
Amendment.
Councillor Masterton,
Amendment.
Councillor McCulloch,
Motion.
Councillor McKendrick,
Kendrick's away.
sorry Councillor McKendrick, can you repeat that, sorry? I'm not sure that Councillor McKendrick's on the call. I'll move on to Councillor McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor McManus,
Amendment.
Councillor McNally,
Motion.
okay. Then we'll move on to Councillor McNeill,
Motion.
Councillor McPake,
Motion.
Councillor McVeigh,
Motion.
Councillor Mooney,
Motion.
Councillor Morgan,
Motion.
Councillor O'Rourke,
Motion.
Councillor Pettigrew, Councillor Pettigrew. Okay, we'll move on to Councillor Quigley,
Motion.
Councillor Redding,
Motion.
Councillor Rorty,
Motion.
Councillor Shevlin,
Motion.
Councillor Shields,
Motion.
Councillor Stephen,
Amendment.
Councillor Stevenson,
Motion.
Councillor Stokes,
Amendment.
Councillor Stubbs,
Amendment.
Councillor Alan Valentine is an apology. Councillor Annette Valentine.
Amendment.
Councillor Watson.
Abstain.
Councillor Weir is an apology. Councillor Wilson.
Abstain.
Finally, Councillor Woods.
Motion.
Thank you. The motion has attracted 35 votes. The amendment attracted 23 votes and there were 8 abstentions. The motion has been carried.
Thank you, everybody. Can I say thank you for everybody coming along today, which is the last budget of this administration. At this time, when it was touched on earlier on, can I thank Elaine Kemp, the Section 95 officer, and our finance team for all the work she's done with all the groups over the last few months to make sure that everybody has a balanced budget on the day. And as usual, the committee admin team have kept us all right today and on time for the meeting. So again, a thank you to Kirsty, I think this is your first council meeting on it, assisting Claire Louise, Mark, and all the other officers that are in attendance today. So thank you very much for your attendance. Bye.